Hello and welcome to Brumbies TV. My name is Kieran Deck. We have a massive show for you today. It's a special edition for Finals Week. The Brumbies hosting the Highlanders on Friday night at GIO Stadium. A couple of rugby experts are in the studio to talk about that clash and the rest of the Super Rugby round. There's heaps more, so stay tuned. It's happening right now. Hello and welcome to this special finals edition of Brumbies TV. Here to talk about the Brumbies claiming the top spot in the Australian Conference and earning a home final this Friday night is Canberra Times rugby guru Chris Dutton and first grade coach at Royals in the local competition, as well as the newly appointed University of Canberra Vikings coach for the upcoming NRC, Wayne Southwell. Boys, great to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Well, gents, it's finals time, an exciting time for everyone here in Canberra, getting to host a match against the defending champions. What are you guys expecting on Friday night from what you've seen so far this season?
Well, geez, I think if we look at probably the last 2 weeks, I don't know whether they're good indicators or not against the Blues and then again last weekend against the Force. The Brumbies obviously weren't at their peak in those games. But Stephen Larkham did say afterwards that those performances don't count for much. Southie, you're probably in a similar position in the local rugby. As a coach, do you those games leading into the finals, do they mean much or can you move on?
I think you certainly move on. I think in some ways, people will have different views on going in with momentum and knowing that you're capable of so much more and playing so much better. And then having things not go your way, bounce the ball, that kind of thing, possibly not your best team or your strongest team. So in the back of his mind, I think he's thinking, obviously, we can do a whole lot better rather than playing particularly well last week and thinking, can you hold that momentum? So there's kind of two schools of thought there. And I think, I'm sure he's more of the second one, I'm sure.
Yeah. I probably think the attack needs to step up a couple cogs this week. The past few weeks, maybe it's been a little bit dewy out at Canberra Stadium and there hasn't been the continuity there for the guys. So you look at the scrum and the line-out's been functioning perfectly. It's just the quality ball hasn't been there for the back line to do something. So if you're looking something to tweak up, that's probably the area to go for.
Yeah, and I think they've been, some of those guys have been a little bit quiet lately. I think, Matt Tamua, obviously, he's going to really step up, I think, as well in that midfield and probably play a huge part in it. And I think Tavidi's probably been a little quiet, hasn't been getting much ball. So you're right there. I think, Chris, if those backs can nail it this week, and hopefully the Highlanders are sitting back thinking, oh well, they weren't a threat last week. They might not be thinking.
We got a bit of a taste of both those players against the Force last weekend, but one of the factors, of course, this week is the New Zealand team aura, and across the season so far, the Australian teams haven't handled them so well, have they? What do you do to battle that in the minds of the players, Wayne?
It's probably a pretty tough one. I mean, they play a really up-tempo, like an offload game, and they're probably far more willing to risk things than Australian teams are. And, that's something that brings crowds in, it makes a great spectacle of it, but the game can come unstuck as well. But I don't think they'll come here and leave any doubt about how they're going to play it. They'll be risking everything, and they'll play percentages there. 20% of the ball might go to ground, but that 80% that stick, they'll hurt. So,
last time they met, the two sides was in Invercargill, about round 10 this year. The points weren't there for the Brumbies, but they were in contention for most of the game.
Yeah, cold, wet and windy Invercargill down there, I think it was. But the Brumbies dominated that game. They had all the territory, they had all the possession. I think it was probably only 2 or 3 chances that the Highlanders had, and they scored off them. So that's going to have to change for the Brumbies. I think the stat is for Australian teams, it's something like they've won 3 out of 25 games. So from a coach's point of view, you probably don't think of it too much, but surely when it gets to that level, maybe the players do start to think about it a little bit and it becomes a bit of a mental thing. But I think you just have to start clean in week 1 of the finals. The Brumbies have beaten the Hurricanes. They know they can beat the Highlanders. They've done it. I think they beat them last year as well. and they could have beaten them over there in Invercargill as well. So I don't think that will pose any problem for them in terms of a mental battle trying to get over them.
Now, the Force game just gone. We'll take a look at the highlights in a minute. But Wayne, from your point of view, how do you take what positives are there for the Brumbies out of that game?
I think just the fact of that obstacle of having to win, and that pressure's now off. And I think that's huge. I mean, from a personal point of view, like, I know, players think about bonus points, even though you mentioned don't think about that. So that's now all gone. And as Chris said, it's a new start on there. And yeah, they beat the Force, but they know they didn't play well, and it really didn't matter how ugly it was. They just did the job. And I guess at the back of their mind, they'd be focusing on next week as well. So
it was pretty ugly though, wasn't it?
It was. And I mean, the good thing is that you go, beauty, it's out of the way.
Yeah.
Job done, and now we can focus and go forward, And that lead-in week is exciting. So I think that's the other thing. I'm sure Steve will be playing on that excitement rather than the nerves of it, but more like, this is exciting, this is where we wanted to be. And I know those guys came back from the Wallaby camp looking forward to being back here because they had something to play for, where a lot of the other guys' conferences didn't.
Yeah.
And Force were in that game because they had nothing to lose.
We'll have a bit of a look at the Highlanders game. They had an impressive upset win over the Chiefs last weekend. But first, let's take a quick look at the clash between the Brumbies and the Force and the highlights from that game. The Brumbies started slow in a game to decide when their season would end. Handling errors plagued the home side early on, but co-captain Christian Lealiafano nailed his first penalty kick for the first points. Matt Tamua crossed for the first try 10 minutes later. Aidan Tua was a standout for the Brumbies, but he'll want to forget this mistake in the 31st minute.
Nobody in front of him. And Ben Tepwahi runs it in for the Western Force.
The score locked at 10-all. The Brumbies forward pack were rewarded for their dominance at the scrum with a penalty try. The Brumbies looked to have a slender advantage at half-time. This try by Kyle Goodwin denied after replays showed he was in front of the kicker.
Over! No try. No try.
The final charge at the chalk and a dominant right-hand fend from Tavita Kuridrani helped the home side to a 2-try half-time lead. Both sides looked like they had shifted down to first gear for the start of the second half. The Brumbies took a quick tap in Force territory off a penalty, but couldn't find a way through. Both sides defended well and lacked the spark needed to trouble the scorers. Men from the ACT into the finals and the Force off home to prepare for 2017. A bit of a scrappy affair, Wayne. Do you expect a similar thing from the side this week, or as a coach, do you think they'll be in a completely different mind frame? What's your thoughts?
The Brumbies?
Yeah.
I think they'll be in a completely different mindset. Definitely, they'll be pumped up for this one. I'm sure would have had an exciting week, as I said. Yeah, they'll come out with nothing. They'll finish the game with nothing left in the tank. I'm sure they'll go all out, and they'll thrive off the crowd and the excitement for the week. I'm sure, and I guess they'll be really looking forward to it and thinking more of how they're going to do it rather than the end result. Will probably be in the back of their minds as well.
And Chris, the crowd's going to play a bit of a factor this week too. This ticket sales are already strong and the Brumbies are doing a few things to try and boost them, hopefully get a big crowd in GIO Stadium.
Yeah, 2,000 free pies. I was trying to work out a way I could get 2,000 tickets for the first 2,000 people through the gates, and free parking as well. Andrew Barr, the ACT Chief Minister, also said on Twitter that channelled his inner Bob Hawke and said that anyone who sacks anyone for leaving early on Friday is a bum, so people can get to the game. It's an unusual kick-off slot, that 6 p.m. one.
The reason for that, for the 6 p.m,
Yeah, so obviously people trying to get here a bit earlier, but geez, if you want to get out of work early on a Friday, it's not a bad excuse. And I was looking at it before, there's only been 2 Super Rugby finals in Canberra since 2005, so they don't come around that often. They're quite rare, and if the Brumbies get a big crowd behind them, I think it'll help. Now,
we're going to move on and change tack a little bit here. You Wayne, have been involved in quite an interesting season for Royals this year. Last year it was interesting as well. You had a number of do-or-die matches in the John O'Dent Cup and it culminated in that amazing grand final. Do you think that the Brumbies can channel a little bit of Royals power there and lift for the Super Rugby finals?
Yeah, look, Kieran, there's no doubt about that. I think, I mean, the Highlanders showed that last year themselves. They came from fourth, I think, or from in that bottom end of that semi-final tier to win it. And so, you know, like it is really, everyone talks about one game at a time, but once you're there, it's a huge relief. Like it is, in some ways the pressure's off, and it's just about focusing on that one step. And then, you know, I guess last year we were a bit fortunate in that we'd experienced taking a lead, losing the lead, and then coming back to win it. And I think those experiences are really important as well. And I think Brumbies have experienced that at times as well, that final surge in the last 10 minutes. They've got guys that are experienced that will hold things together. I don't think they'll panic. We're inexperienced sides, and I know from a local rugby perspective, you know, we've lost 7 guys from that starting lineup, and it is that we've lost a number of games in that late second half. So,
well, one of those players I wanted to ask you about next, Blocker, potentially, David Pocock. His factor, what does it mean?
Well, I mean, I think the David Pocock factor is huge. You can't underestimate it, and you can't overestimate it. He's such an influential player. He's the type of guy who can win you a game. He's the type of guy who can lift other blokes around him. He takes pressure off other guys in the back row. You Jared Butler, Scott Fardy. He takes pressure off the halfback. He takes pressure off the back line because of what he does at the breakdown. But as we were talking about before, his comeback game from suspension earlier in the season was against the Highlanders, and I'll admit I was one who was over there and I thought, David Pocock's back, the Brumbies are going to win this because of his dominance at the breakdown, and they didn't. The Highlanders were quite successful at taking him out of the game. So you got to remember he hasn't played in 5 or 6 weeks as well. So we have to be careful whether to, you know, balance that out against Sally. You got guys in your team who are experienced. How important is it when someone like that comes back?
Oh, I think you can't put a factor on it. You know, you can't sort of judge how important it is because it is that important.
A couple of weeks ago against the Reds, Stephen Larkham made a decision to play Joe Powell as the starting scrum half, and that allowed Tomas Kubeli to come in the second half, and he had a major impact in that game. Can you imagine Bernie making any big calls on selections for a final?
Geez, I don't know. It's that was a good opportunity for someone like Joe Powell to have a crack, and I think Thomas had only arrived back in the country a couple of days before the game. But geez, when he came off the bench, he was outstanding. So, I mean, stranger things have happened, haven't they? You never know what coaches are thinking. They live on a different planet, I think. But if you've got star players there, this is a game that you give them to step up.
Exactly. You don't get a second chance, and he's an international player, and particularly up against the 9 like Smith. I think you need to be abrasive, you need to be calm at the same time and not let him get on top of you. Just those little niggly things that happen at the base of the scrum, those kinds of things. Kubeli will handle that with ease and probably give some of the same, whereas Joe, is relatively inexperienced in that side of things. And, you know, with Smith, you want to be up there and in his face as much as you possibly can, I think.
Well, with the Highlanders, when the Brumbies played over there in Invercargill, I think Joe was telling me that they were calling him Goldilocks on the sideline because no one knew who he was and that sort of thing. So you could bet that Aaron Smith would see that and have a good crack.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment just to have a look at the highlights from the Highlanders clash with the Chiefs on the weekend. The Highlanders will go into the finals super confident of defending their title after upsetting the Chiefs in Dunedin. The Chiefs scored with their first crack at the line. A strong Dunedin crowd had to wait 30 minutes for the Highlanders to score, but Waisaki Nahalo made sure it was worth it. The Highlanders proved their ability to strike from anywhere on the park with this effort midway through the second term. The Chiefs weren't done yet though. Damien McKenzie setting up another 5 points in the corner. Every decision in the competition has a lot more pressure at this time of year. The Highlanders' third try went to the TMO, who ruled the ball had been knocked free. And the home side claimed a stunning 10-point victory.
How you going? Today I'm going to show you how I use my professional way to power my performance. I'm actually going to jump into the fruit. For a double day, when we've got a big training session in the Arvo, I like to make sure I'm fully loaded with energy and there's no excuses on the field for burning James Dargaville and people like that. So I'm going to put a couple of strawberries in. Strawberries are very rare actually, so a bit of a treat today. I think I go about 12 blueberries. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of yogurt in. Just 2 heaped tablespoons usually. Gets the texture going. And then top it up with milk. Right, the finishing touch. I'll go with the cocoa usually, organic. It's probably my favourite. For this, I reckon chocolate will just really top off the fruit and combine with the yogurt to make an absolute sensation. Yeah, that's a perfect brew there. Oh, delicious.
The Lions entered their clash with the Jaguars heavy favourites, and they looked the part early on. A win would help the competition leaders secure a home route to a possible Super Rugby final. They held a 10-point lead into half-time.
The easiest of tries, a dominance of scrums.
In Argentina, the crowds haven't had much to cheer for in the Jaguars' first season in the competition, but boy did they make an impact with their final match. The Jaguars scrum couldn't be contained after the break. Lions coach Johan Ackerman may have started to regret resting his first 15 for the clash.
The penalty try.
And the Jaguars proved equally tough to contain when attacking the flanks. This try awarded after a review.
Inches shy of the line, that was De La Fuente. Just there, try. You may award the try, I think was the...
And the Jaguars claiming a 12-point upset. In other results, the Sunwolves end their first season with just the one win. After going down to the Sharks, the Hurricanes smashed the Crusaders and the Blues held on against the Tars. The Bulls cruised home against the Cheetahs and the Rebels claimed bragging rights over the Reds. And this is how the teams finished up, with the Hurricanes out in front, the Highlanders close behind, and the Brumbies in fourth. The Waratahs fell just short of a finals berth and the Jaguars jumped to 13th with their final round upset win. Well, from that, guys, who do you think will be left standing in a few weeks' time? Because at this point in time, it's anyone's competition, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really tough at the moment, actually, especially the first week of the finals. It's got 4 Kiwi teams there that I think everyone thinks is going to win their games. Yeah. You know, there's even potential for the Brumbies to host a home final in the second week of the final series. So if they do that, I think the Brumbies can, if they get through the Highlanders and get a lot of confidence out of that, I think they can go a long way. But, geez, for mine, it's hard to go past the Crusaders, probably the Crusaders and maybe the Chiefs as well. I know I probably stole that one off you, Southey, but they're two fantastic teams. And you look at their ability to travel and win overseas and win at home as well, it's tough to go past them.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chris. I mean, I'm thinking kind of Chiefs originally and then thinking about the Crusaders who made a lot of changes in that last game last weekend, brought a lot of players in off the bench that rested a few. You know, I think they're a really dangerous side and not things didn't go particularly well for them at the weekend either. So they didn't lose by that much.
Yeah.
So I think those two teams will be there. And as you said, like Brumbies, everyone's kind of written them off a little bit at this stage, which might be a good thing as well. And you know, there's every chance that they can be there as well because there's a lot of experience there and a lot of fight in those guys. So they won't go down quietly, I'm sure.
And I guess that's one of the beauties of the format. It allows the underdog story to play its course, and the Brumbies are potentially on the receiving end of that come this weekend and potentially in a few weeks' time. No mention of the Lions, who finished on top in points.
Yeah, I mean, they're an interesting one, the Lions. Like, so hard to gauge with the South African teams this year, given that one whole side of the draw didn't even play any New Zealand teams. So, you know, it just makes it interesting trying to do the form. You look at the New Zealand teams losing against each other, Australian teams having only won a couple games against New Zealand teams, and South African teams, well, it's anyone's guess. But tipping whoever, if you draw the Lions in the finals, you're probably excited for that matchup.
I think so. I think the home series is important in those games, particularly South African sides. If you can, you know, lucky enough to draw them to come here, it's a completely different game than that travel factor and all the rest of it. So you're right, it is hard to judge them. They snuck up, I guess. But yeah, I think, and for that factor, this game for the Brumbies makes it all the more important. Obviously, you know, if they lose, they're out anyway. But certainly, there's a lot to, you know, get through this one. And it certainly won't be any more difficult the following week, you know, put it that way.
Well, the travel factor is interesting because it's huge in Super Rugby, but the Lions are coming back from Argentina, so it automatically negates that. Yeah, exactly. It automatically negates their advantage there. So I think we're on a pretty level playing field at the moment.
All right, so let's get a little bit more focused now down to some individual players. And Wayne, I'm looking to you for this one. But what have you seen amongst the Brumbies squad now that you're the coach of the NRC squad this year? Is there anyone who's particularly impressed you in the last few weeks among the younger guys?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be guys in that next mix for the NRC coming out of that. And, you know, the second rowers, obviously I'm a huge fan of Tommy Staniforth, with his attitude and the culture. I guess I know him so well, I suppose. But I know like guys like him, Eniver as well is another one, and certainly in the halves as well. Having watched some of the under-20s and the program through there, there's a couple of young guys coming through there that Jordan Jackson, a couple of others, and certainly, you know, from that perspective, those guys will be well and truly there, obviously. But there's also some other guys in the club comp that have been training now for a couple of weeks, at least just doing strength work, that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how they might, you know, fit into that mix and take that next step.
With one round left in the local competition, it's holding up for that fourth spot for the playoffs. Wayne, one of your side is in contention up against Uni North for that fourth spot. So I want to ask you, Chris, who do you think is going to fill out the playoff spot?
Well, I saw Wayne twitching nervously in his seat just then. It's a bit like that at the moment in the John Ident Cup. A lot of people think it's the closest it's been in quite a few years, with Uni North going quite well this year. Gungahlin, as we mentioned, you know, they've gone to a new level. I think that Royals are going to get through, and I'm not just saying that because Southey's sitting here and he might knock me off my seat if I don't say that. But they're probably just a tough ask against Tuggeranong this weekend, but they probably just have that little bit more drive than maybe Uni North do, but geez, they're not far away. I think they haven't made the finals since about 2001, the Owls. So if you're talking about motivation, they've certainly got it as well.
Well, as they say, it's a new competition when the finals start, so we'll know soon enough who's in the final four. Before we wrap up today's show, let's take a look at the highlights from last week's John Ident Cup action. The Uni North's Owls arrived in Queanbeyan playing for a spot in the top four. The Owls had the first points, but the favourites quickly found a way through.
Keith Morgan, the outside centre, that was too easy in the end.
An Owls win would make it all but impossible for defending champions Royals to make it to this year's finals. The Owls attacked the left side and Charlie Fairfield-Smith had 5.
Smith, the big lock, and he strolls through. It's a try to Uni North.
It didn't take long for the home side to hit back though. Ryan Jones under the posts, helping the Whites regain the lead.
A good run in the middle there.
2 quick tries before half-time betrayed the Owls' first half efforts, blowing the margin out to 20 points. Brumbies utility Robbie Coleman scoring before the buzzer.
Try.
The second half started the way it finished with more Queanbeyan points.
Try. Fly half. And this is Spears through up the middle. Spears steps off his left.
But the Owls had more flight left in them. Fairfield Smith nabbing a double thanks to a charge down in the Whites' red zone.
Scrum. It's a good carry there forward from Darby, the replacement lock.
The damage had been done. The Owls now need to beat Gungahlin this weekend to squeeze through to the playoffs.
Well, that's come from nowhere.
Well, a huge weekend of rugby coming up, starting of course with Friday's Super Rugby blockbuster at GIO. Chris, Wayne, thanks for spending some time on Brumbies TV.
Thanks for having us.
This game is sure to be a big one and I look forward to seeing you out there. Remember, for any details you're after regarding this week's match, head to brumbies.com.au. Thanks for your time and see you on Friday when you knock off for kickoff.